Well, hello there and greetings to you. It is Matthew McDonald here. Welcome to this Affiliate Pages Pro tutorial. We're going to take a look at spacing your pages. So what I'll do here, I'm inside of WordPress admin. Let's go and create a new page here and we'll start from scratch. Put in a couple of elements. Spacing page components. So let's go ahead and give it a headline. Let's do some columns as well. And we will let's put a couple of buttons in those columns. Let me just give it a bit of color as well. Option 1. Option 2. Let's say we've got yes and no. We just pop an image holder under here so we'll see the spacing laid out. Maybe we'll put an image in there. I will turn this into a banner, give it a height of 200, and if you want it to contain the whole image, you can do contain, and this is not an actual image tutorial. We're going to be doing layout. So there we go, we've got a little bit of content here. I'll just go ahead and save this and I'll show you the default settings for spacing stuff out. So by default, you can see here we've got a little bit of a gutter, bit of gaps between the components. They are completely customizable. So if you go to the settings first of all, we can do like global settings with spacing out. Then we've got individual component settings, and when we actually select the component, we've got block settings. So from here we can add margin, add padding. We'll take a look at that in a moment. And then we've also got components. We can add one here, which is a spacer. So we'll do that in a tick where you actually can add more space between components. But let's start from scratch. So what I'm going to do is I'm opening up the settings here. Let's give the page a background here so we can clearly see what's going on. And I'm just going to remove all the default settings, so get rid of all the padding and the spacing so you can see the difference. So there you go, you can see now the page, we don't have any padding and spacing. You can see the buttons are right up against the image. And then what we can do is we can start with a global spacing. So if we do the spacing X, that's going to do, you can see the horizontal spacing going on, and spacing Y, that's your vertical spacing, so you can lay it out like that. So that gives you a nice even option to evenly space your components exactly how you want them. And you can combine these, so you can actually space out from the settings and also from the components. Let's take that off. I'm leaving this off so we can clearly see what each option does. We've got padding. So in the settings padding, the padding will be around the whole page. So if we add padding, you can see we're getting the padding around the whole page. Now we've also got Y padding, which is going to be the top and the bottom. So now you can see we're getting padding on the top and the bottom. So that is your spacing options for global options. And what I will do, I'm just going to leave the spacing off and let's go and add a spacer. So now you can see we've actually got a spacer block between the buttons and the image. And if I put the mouse over, we can see where that block is. And selecting the block, we can actually from here choose on how much that spacing is, and that's going to give you a lot of spacing. So you can see now if we remove it, the space is bigger. Let's see how big we can make it. And if for some reason you need a huge space, you can obviously put 2 spaces and stack them on one another. And here's the minimal space with using spacer. If you need a space less than that, then you would use the margin component. So let's get rid of the spacer here. I'm just going to go ahead and delete it. We're going to select our image here, and we're going to go to block settings, and we're going to add some margin. So adding margin, we've got the X and Y again. So if I do Y margin, you can see the gap above it is adding. So there you go. Clicking away, you can see an accurate of how much margin we've got. So we've actually got more than a spacer there just by using the margin option. Going back to our block settings, we've also got margin X. So you can see it's adding margin to the side. So you can get really specific with these simple options. And then you've got padding. Now I'm going to tell you the difference between the padding and the margin. So with the padding, we can add a global all-around padding. And what it does is, if you think of a block, the padding is adding white space on the inside of the block, while the margin's adding it to the outside of the block. Now the best way to see this is if we give the block a different background. Let's go orange. You can see we've got padding because the background is visible. If we were to take off the padding, you wouldn't even know that it's got a background color. It is there, but because you've got flush edges, it's not going to show. And then if you were to add margin, you still won't see the background because what it's doing, sorry, padding, you will see it, but with the margin you won't. It's adding spacing outside of the block itself. So if you want to see the background, you don't need to use the margin, you can do it with the padding. Now another thing you can do here with the shadow, you might not see a lot of the effect with the shadow, but if you add padding, if you add margin, now you can see the shadow. I'm not sure how well that's going to come through on your video, but you can see we've got a shadow there on the back of the block. Some of the elements like the video and the buttons, you have an option to also have shadow on the component. So let's go to another option here. We'll grab this button, and here you can see shadow. So if I add shadow, I can see it, but we've also got shadow in the block settings. So it can add shadow to the block, or it can add shadow to the actual element. Now if you want to make this visible, then what you can do is you can add the padding. And now you can see the difference. So we've got the shadow on the actual button, which is the button settings, but under the block settings, the outer line here, we've also got a shadow. So you can get pretty creative with how you make a button look. For instance, you could make it really stand out like that, and you could create some pretty awesome looking buttons. Look at that. Demanding those click-through ratios. Okay, so there's a quick look at spacing and margin, and what I would actually recommend you to do to not overwhelm yourself. There are quite a few options when it comes to spacing and padding, but it is designed in a way that you don't actually have to use all of them. It's only when you need to get really customized, like you want this button to have a margin, you can do that, or padding. But what you can start with is using the global settings, because that's going to lay out everything evenly, all your different blocks, and by default you're going to have a pretty good option for those ones. So there we go. That's laying out spacing, padding, laying out your content, adding a little bit of, it's called gutter in the web design world, adding the gutters. And also you can fully remove them as well. Let me just quickly show you that to wrap up this video. So I'm just going to get rid of this image, get rid of a couple of things here. Let's add a video here. So you can see that we've got this border around the video. Let me just click away so you can see the look and feel of it. Let's add a call to action button here. Just give it a little bit of life here. Okay. So we've got a headline and we've got a call to action button. We've got a video. So if I want this video to be flush with the black background, what I can do is I can go to the global settings and I can get rid of the spacing and the padding. And now you can see the video is flush. It looks actually really cool. The video is flush to the edge of the page, and same as the background. And then if you have components like the button and you think, well, I want the video flush, but I don't want the button right to the edge, you can select the individual component. You can go to block settings and you can add margin. So for this one, we can add, X margin here, and let's say 3 for instance. And there you go. You can see that looks pretty nice. And if you put the video above, you can see we've got this bit of padding or margin going on up the top here. And so what we can do is we've got spacing Y, get rid of that. And now you can see the video is fully flush to the top of the page. And we could go to this last item here, block setting, add margin X, or even throw in a spacer there. And you can see we can get some really cool effects like that. So let's try a little bit more loud colors here so you can see what is possible. And what I might do is do the background in black. That button would need to be a different color. Just showing you that you can do some really cool effects using padding, margin and video. And just before we wrap this one up, you can use your spacers as well as dividers. So for instance, if we throw in a spacer here, we can see we've got the spacer here between the headline and the video. You can change the background, so we can go to edit the spacer here, block settings, and we can give it a background color. So now we've created this this divider here, and you could adjust the height of it. So for instance, let's go black background. We can move the headline down. Let's put it below the video, and then we could have the spacer with a matching color here, and I'm going to make it a bit thinner. And if we would go to the video here, you see we're getting that effect. So we're using it as a border at the top, but you can also use it as a divider. There you can see we've got it below the video, between the headline, before the call to action. So a little bit extra on the tutorial there. That is it. I'm wrapping up this video. Thanks for tuning in. I hope those little tips are helpful to you, and go and build some super awesome affiliate pages. I'll see you in another video very soon.